Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the inaugural Transpire live streaming event. So enjoy. So, people that are familiar with the Transpire NED and Director CPD and networking program will know that we always start with a joke. But tonight, we're not having a joke because one of our members, Ashley Smith, who I was hoping would be here, was doing something which was snow joke over the our half-term break. So what has Ashley been up to? There's a bit of a clue there. So something to do with running, involves toilets. Yeah. He's been running a marathon in the Himalayas, or the foothills of the Himalayas, and he sent over these photos to give us an idea of his amazing experience. Oh, you can really believe that's where he was. Yeah. And that's his other half. They do it together, apparently. So there he is, in full flight. So now you understand why he always eats the most at Transpire events. He can have unlimited calories. Yeah. So he ran his first marathon in London and raised $2.5 grand. And over the years, he's raised over 25,000 for local charities. What a top man! But without further ado, over to Sarah, who's our speaker for this evening.
Okay. Hello, good evening.
I think I need to.
Now we're going to try and work how this works with the screen. So I shall, I'll take it. Hoping that's working. You're in the room. So Tony's just getting the slides ready. So the aim of this evening's event is to talk through delivering change and promoting inclusion through pro bono roles. So looking at what do pro bono roles give you on your journey to, obviously the aim of Transpire Network is to be ultimately to be a NED. But what can pro bono roles give you as part of that? I'm using a couple of my own examples of areas I've worked in just to bring it to life a little bit. And I'm a NED on the Alliance Homes Group Housing Association down in Bristol. So if we move to the first one, if we look at pro bono work, what does it actually involve? And I think really it breaks down into two different areas. So the first one is really saying that these are roles with a governance framework around them. They're roles where you have a series of responsibilities, possibly dictated by an organisation, charities commission, company's house, if it's a directorship alongside a charity trustee role. School governors, university governors, or other sort of non-paid, but where you actually have a governance role in the organisation, or alternatively unpaid advice to either charities, small businesses and so on. And I think they're split, and I've split them like that because your personal responsibility is quite different in both of those scenarios, and it's worth just thinking through as you go to take on a role, what is my responsibility as I'm taking this on. So I'm going to take two charities. The first one is one where I am pro bono but not in the governance role, so I'm not a trustee, I'm just helping them out. The other is, and we'll come on to in a moment, is a role where I am a trustee, and again, and as a regulated industry. I'll go through it and explain a bit more, but slight differences there when you've got a regulator involved, and there's a lot of personal responsibility, and some of that we'll come on to. If we take the first one, Lindengate Charity is a very, very small charity, only established in 2014. It's been growing like topsy. And I think some of the difficulty with looking at change is saying, okay, so this is now growing, it's growing at pace. What are the challenges if you're taking on a role in an organisation like this? In 2016, so only a couple of years in, they did ask me to look at an internal audit. So I'm, from my background, not an internal auditor, but I've worked in the finance sector, understand risk, and so they thought it might be useful as a volunteer for me to do that role. They used a format, was an existing format from a similar social, therapeutical, horticulture network. They also had an extensive set of policies in place. So they were aware of charity governance, and they'd set themselves up as a CIO, but that's fine. That didn't make a material difference, I don't think. But everyone's running at a fast pace. So I thought what I'd do with both of these is probably ask you to come up with what some of the ideas you think might be a challenge, and then I'll show you some of the ones that I came across when I was doing it. So in that scenario, does anyone have any sort of thoughts on what do you think might be the challenges?
Just having some structure in place.
Structure, yeah. Yeah.
Processes.
Structure and process is a very interesting one, yeah. We'll come on to that.
So did they have an extensive set of policies but weren't necessarily following them?
Can't comment on a live. Yeah, so I think let's just take those two and go on to the next slide. Access to the staff was actually one of the most difficult things. Getting hold of them, pinning them down to meetings. Because although they wanted this, they were growing so fast that everything was just crazy. And they were working at the weekends, and they were working into the evenings, and because two of them had actually founded it, they lived and breathed the whole thing. So it was difficult to actually sort of pin everybody down, and then get two or three of them together was very difficult, the senior team. Articulating future issues, so trying to make somebody think forward. So again, it is almost coming into saying, this isn't happening now because there's only 3 or 4 of you, but what if you're 10, what if you're 20, what if you're 50? Because they were growing not only in staff members but also in huge numbers of volunteers. How do you actually articulate all of everything that's going on and make sure everyone knows everyone's exactly on the same page? Because they can be when there's only sort of 2 or 3 of you, but they actually can't be when there are more, which comes to the point about structure and process. So I think I had to stretch out the internal audit because of availability. That was partly myself, but also the people there. So then things were gradually changing as I was doing the internal audit. So that also brought some challenges, because you're trying to then pick up the fact that it's in flux at the same time as pin something down and say, this is my finding. So things were actually changing as I was writing the document. So I had to account for that. Pressing need to standardise work though, wow, because you suddenly get to a point, you now have 20 volunteers, you only had 2. How do all the volunteers know what they should be doing? Because realistically, everyone has their own ideas, and being a charity, the trouble is everyone is very, very, very bought into the organisation and very well-meaning, but they don't necessarily think through all the implications of everything that they do. So it's standardising to get to that point. And risk management, and then financial management. The other charities model, interestingly, for the internal audit, had huge gaps all over the financial bit. That it didn't follow the charity commission guidance. So I ended up picking up the charity commission guidance and applying that. So I think this particular area is quite an interesting one, so maybe we can come on to that in discussion. But also there's a need for the senior team to follow through. So you walk away, you've given the piece of document over, here goes, how does it follow through? Well, interestingly, I'd recommended another audit. They've now come back to me in 2.5 years on, to ask me to have another look. So it's it's always a work in flow, you know, and as the charity grows, it changes, you know, and different people are involved in it. In terms of inclusion, we were looking at inclusion as part of this as well. I think it's, you know, trying to get everybody's buy-in to the changes, making sure that the staff and volunteers are completely involved, and the service is particularly strong on, you know, looking at service users who are in the spectrum from sort of depression, autism, dementia. So there's a lot of, you know, work happening in that space, but also making sure that, you know, you've got people who can relate to those individuals in the service. That's really, really critical. The other charity is quite different. Abbeyfield and in, you know, sort of Gerrard's Cross in Buckinghamshire, it's a very small charity founded years and years ago. The Abbeyfield Society itself is an umbrella organisation. It has homes in its own right, but it also has a lot of member societies. This one is a member society. So the member society is actually legally and sort of charities governance responsible in its own right for the house. So it's a house for 13 residents, but it's regulated by the Register of Social Housing, regulator of Social Housing. Then basically it's a question of, what do you see here? You know, we need to update the set of policies. We've had a number of trustees in place for some time. So probably put the question back to everyone again. Any thoughts on challenges in this sector? Complacency, hard word, but I think people get comfortable in their roles. I'd probably say very comfortable, yeah. Maybe not looking at what they need to, not looking at everything they need to look at. Any other thoughts?
Disconnect between the board of governors and the senior leadership team?
Yes, yeah. It's very, very small, but even so you can lose the connectivity in that. Any other?
Be aware of those carrying standards and like external
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of regulation around this. You know, one house or 10 houses or 1,000 houses or 10,000 houses, the regulations are the same. So you take on the responsibility of those regulations. So if we go on to the next slide, just have a look. I think part of it, the picking up your point on complacency, I think comfortable. People were comfortable that they were addressing everything. It had been, you know, ticking along, everyone had been doing the right thing. But I think it's also needing to persuade people that times have moved on, policies have changed, and what the regulation is out there. You know, there's masses of regulation. We have so many policies, it's just crazy, because for one house you'd think, you know, why would you need all these? But actually, you know, the health and safety document alone is about 300 pages, because we've got to look at everything from gas to Legionella to asbestos to fire safety, the whole works, just for one house. But yes, we do. And you know, the regulatory, so safeguarding is a huge one, GDPR, there are things specifically for the regulator of social housing, money rent standard, but equally other things, professional boundaries, sort of equality, diversity, inclusion, and getting people to accept that they have got to take on the Charities Commission Governance Code. There were a few discussions around that particular code when we actually sat and talked about it. Not always thought that we have to do this, and it's like, well, the question is, well, why? And it's like, well, we're in a different world now to the world back in maybe the 1980s or 1990s, when people were more familiar with what the regulation was. Everything has moved on, and there is nowhere to hide, because the Charities Commission has all of the regulations on their website. All of the regulator of social housing, it's all on the website. So effectively, you know, you can't say I didn't know. You know, it's out there. We did actually use some of the sort of central Abbeyfield policies, because they, as an umbrella organisation, provide the member societies with the benefit of what they need to do for themselves. So, but you still got to tailor it because some of it doesn't work, and also they produced something again where the financial policy still didn't cover enough areas. So we added and amended and changed that quite a lot. Trustee induction also caused one or two trustees to just have a bit of a deep think about what their role was, because I think it rather depended when they were taken on how it was explained to them, and so when they had it in black and white, a couple of them felt a bit uncomfortable, and we had to spend a long time talking to them about it. So I think those, in terms of inclusion, I think we trying to engage specifically across the age divide, and we aren't many years on the age divide within our particular sort of set of trustees, but still there are big differences in the way people think about things, the way they approach things. So trying to sort of engage all the older trustees, make sure they're involved. The need also to try and revive the board, which the chair has been actively doing, to bring more people in, to bring them in, people of a working age, people who are out there in businesses, in organisations, and who have got the benefit of the understanding and the knowledge of the current day. So I think it's but the difficulty is finding people with the time to commit. It's a commitment, but you get a lot out of it. So I think we're still seeing other areas where we're trying to get younger people from the community to get involved in visiting the house, so that you have a cross-generational movement, that the younger people are, some of them are doing Duke of Edinburgh, and they're coming in to talk to people who have been through the war and out the other side, because some of them in our house are in their 90s. And so, what was it like? So they're sharing some of that cross-generational information. But we have quite a few challenges particularly around societal challenges for the house, because with people staying longer in their own homes, and the aim of the particular house is supported living, not care. And there's a big change when you step into care, because care brings a lot more regulation with it as well. So what we're doing is finding that you're being squashed between the time that people are spending longer in their own homes, less time when they're actually able, and then finding that they're in the house, then they get ill and not able to stay, they need care. So actually the length of time in the particular house, the model, we're being challenged continuously on the model, which is quite interesting. So, what have I put next one? So I guess trying to sort of bring this back round and say, okay, those are examples from my own personal experience, but everybody's experience will be different when you take on a pro bono role. How does it fit with your 10-year plan? What are you looking to get out of it? Have you got a Transpire plan through Tony, which I have? And how does it work? How does the role fit? Will I enjoy doing it? Because you're going to be spending quite a lot of time in meetings with people. If you don't get on with them, or you don't broadly have a bit of a laugh somewhere along the line, it's going to be deadly serious. But then what due diligence can you do on the organisation to prevent you walking in on day one? Because organisations will be very keen to get trustees, particularly, or governors, and ... If you're really keen to take something on, they'll welcome you with open arms. But if you find out afterwards that there's a whole pile of difficult stuff that hasn't been talked about, it's almost like, how can you try and get to know about the organisation before you go through that door, before you commit? It's very hard, because no one will actually give you all the information clearly, because it's not something that they would normally provide. I think you need to think seriously about what are the skills you want to develop. So in my case, it was specifically around evidencing the governance, evidencing some of the financial, the risk management. That was my personal sort of being able to show that in action. How much time can you allocate? Because again, a bit like a piece of string, some of these roles, oh, you've got a bit of spare time, excellent. And then suddenly one meeting becomes, or could you just look at this email? Could you just, and those bits gradually eat up quite a lot of time. So you have to almost try and be very, very careful on how many spare moments you have, or you allocate to them. But you need to think about how much you can allocate. Because if you're balancing 2 or 3, again, and then if you take on a NED role, you're then still responsible in your trustee or pro bono work for completing whatever you've committed to. So it's how do you balance it? Particularly ask yourself the legal regulatory responsibility one. That's a really, really big one, and a lot of people forget. I think if you've done the FT NED diploma or you've done the IOD diploma, you will have had a lot of that explained to you. If you haven't, you need to think about that very, very carefully. The regulatory one is the health and safety could come after you. For example, on the Abbey field that I'm on, they can come after us if we are negligent in how we deal with the house and something happens to one of the residents. So you have to go through a process of how can I evidence, how can I evidence, how can I show, how can I evidence, almost in every meeting you're going through, you know, what are we doing enough, constantly challenging yourself on those boards. And it's the same for financial, same for, you know, a lot of organisations, you know, it's the responsibility. Is somebody that you've employed as a member of staff or as a volunteer doing what they say they're doing, and how do you know? I'm not going to scare you, but just to make you think those things through. And then are you covered by the right insurance? So there's trustee insurance in place. Okay, that probably won't help you in a health and safety side, but it will cover a certain amount of your liability. But don't assume it will cover all your liability. Professional indemnity cover probably is more into if you are giving specific advice in a pro bono role to an organisation. You know, how are you going to be covered if they come back to you later and say, you told us do X? You know, even if it is your background, you know, are you actually covered for doing that? So I think that was it, wasn't it? I think there's building up, so relevance of the pro bono work. I think it's, you could easily go into an ed role without pro bono work, that's clear. I think it's a question of, there are similar skill sets though, so again, if you're looking at evidencing board readiness and you want to just evidence a bit more in one angle so that you can go in saying, I have, my main skill is X, and I have Y and Z, and I can evidence Y and Z as well. So the key skill sets, finance, risk management, strategy, IT, marketing, property, legal, HR, are the same. They're needed in a small organisation as all the large, big companies. It's a way of experiencing firsthand the governance process. If you haven't been through that, it's through boards. How do boards make decisions? How difficult are decisions to make? Because sometimes they are trying to persuade people around a particular issue. And you could learn new skills. You know, it's a way of learning, definitely. I mean, I've learned all sorts of additional things I never thought were out there, like, you know, Legionella testing, and whether or not you have to, you know, have we got to actually flush that plug out every week to be sure that we're not going to get some Legionella trapped in one of the showers in the house. Never thought about it. But, and then, you know, how do you build up your board level network? So some of the people through Pro Bono you will get to know, they've also got other roles, and they also have other members of the family or people they're connected to. So it's a useful way of building up a wider network, and just builds a compelling case for hiring you. Why you? You know, why should somebody looking for an ed hire you? And you know, what can you bring and show? But also don't forget, and I think the thing, I put this in the bottom because over and over and over people forget that what they learn out of larger organisations is highly relevant in small organisations, but not everybody who is in those organisations is familiar with that. So if we're talking about sort of anti-money laundering, if we're talking about data protection, not everybody in a small charity or a school on a school board would actually know about that. So if you know that type of thing out of your own organisation, then you're bringing that into them, but you're bringing experience and skills they haven't got. But don't underestimate what you actually do know, because I've had a few people say to me, "Oh, I don't know very much," and then you talk about something and go, "Hold on, but you know that," and "Oh, hold on, you know that." So don't underestimate what you're going to be bringing to these people, but do the due diligence on them as well, because you don't want to find yourself just rushing in with arms open and then find you've got 2 or 3 years where it's difficult actually to pull away. So I think that's broadly where we are on the presentation. I think we're going to do a panel discussion and have a quick little conversation. Thank you. We're going to be...
Can I introduce our panellists for this evening? Neil.
Hello.
I'll let him say who he is. He has a day job as a sort of interim turnaround COO restructuring officer, but in between times he does projects for Cranfield Trust.
Yeah, sure. Do whatever you want. Thank you. Hello. I think I've probably just got a couple of minutes, Tony, haven't I?
Yeah.
So I'll just quickly position who I am and what I know a little bit about, and then at least you can ask me questions about something I know about, which always helps me. I, as a day job, have been doing restructuring at the board level for banks, private equity, hard-nosed stuff for maybe 20, 25 years. As CEO, COO, Chief Restructuring Officer, consultant, and mentor. In between those, I do a charity job, and I've worked with people like Save the Children all over the world. I've probably worked for 15 to 20 charities, and most of them, or a lot of them, I've worked through the Cranfield Trust. And Alice, my colleague, is here with us today as well, and she's responsible for looking after a lot of the consultancy projects. So, talking about pro bono rather than the commercial work I do, then I've probably worked on 15 projects. The Cranfield Trust has been going for 30 years. It was first of all challenged by Princess Anne with the Cranfield students, Cranfield Business School, who I'm sure you probably know of, is a great business school, to give some more back. Cranfield Trust has now been going for 30 years. It works on about 300 projects a year, and there are about 1,000 volunteers. But there's plenty of projects that Alice is looking for volunteers for, from a pro bono point of view, at board levels and at other levels, particularly in London at the moment, with the City Bridge Trust, which I'm sure if you speak to Alice, she'll tell you more about. I would say there are 4 things that the Cranfield Trust specialises in. One is consultancy projects, which are very broad. Secondly, tailored HR advice, which she's been doing for quite a long time. Mentoring, which is a sort of important activity, which I'll talk about briefly in a minute, if that's all right. And masterclasses it runs as well. So the Cranfield Trust mission is to provide free business skills to build successful charities. And the people that work for the Cranfield Trust tend to be highly skilled, but that doesn't mean to say you've got to have an MBA, you've just got to bring experience to it. So of those 3 things, I think the thing I would take out of that, having talked to Tony and we talked this morning, Sarah, is that you may want to develop a board career, and being a trustee is a good way to maybe do that and test that out with very different sizes of organisations. And I've worked in organisations where I've maybe had 100 people reporting to me, or I've had 3 reporting to me. The challenges only become more the smaller they are, not the bigger they are, and you learn more in terms of leadership, as much around the smaller ones because they've got even less resource. But what I would say is that, first of all, in terms of mentoring projects that the Cranfield Trust do, there's less of a commitment probably in terms of the amount of time, although you still do it over 6 months. It's a way to work with people if you like working with people. Secondly, in terms of the projects, they're more of a commitment across probably more functional disciplines, from strategy, marketing, sales, operations, HR, ICT, finance, for example. But it's not the same level of commitment as you would have to make as a trustee, where you might be in there for a number of years. And it gives you a chance, I think, to look at an organisation below the bonnet, before you commit longer term, or it helps you to understand charities a bit better before you make a commitment to a trustee of any particular charity. If that's the sort of route you're looking to get your skills up in terms of becoming a better board person, which frankly is just a better leader really, and I find that I learn far more from charities than ever I teach them, whatever the size is, and you get more out of giving something to them than you ever, get back, if that's the right way around. So my own view is that charities really need our help, that we can really make a difference. But my view about commercial and charity is I don't see them as being any different. I mean, charities have just as much challenge as commercial organisations. The only difference is that in charities the profit goes back into the charity, and in commercial it goes to the shareholders. It's no excuse to lose money or to do it badly or not to meet the challenges in terms of leadership, whether you've got 3 people reporting to you or 500. They're just the same. And I think the onus around doing good work in charities and providing leadership is even more challenging, and therefore if that's something you are doing or choose to do, it's very worthwhile work, and your skills are desperately needed. I'll stop there.
Oh. Questions?
I think you mentioned that it is advisable to take out insurance, and you did mention neither this is a question to Sarah, but anyway, it's welcome to answer. Trustee insurance, but if you already have PII, professional indemnity, do you still need that trustee insurance?
The charity ought to be taking out trustee insurance anyway, for the trustees. I think it's trying to look at where the gaps are between the cover in different things, and the responsibility is still there even though you have as much insurance as you could possibly take out, and you probably wouldn't be able to take out some individual insurance. I mean, I don't know whether you ever did in some of the roles that you've taken on, but I think you need to understand what insurance cover you have got, and then what the gaps are effectively in that, and therefore, what are you doing on your board to make sure that you're getting assurance on some of those, particularly the health and safety and regulatory issues, to be sure that you're asking the right questions, so that if anyone ever came to that board to ask, how could you evidence what you're doing day to day? So in a way, it's almost like a juxtaposition of insurance and what you're doing actively on that board.
I would never persuade people not to get insurance, but my personal insurance is to do a good job. And I suppose if I look at it over 25 years, I don't know about you, but I've never heard of anybody being sued on it. So while I wouldn't say don't get insurance, I never have done. I just try and do a good job.
Can I just add that under the Cranfield Trust, all our volunteers are covered by.
So that's great, Alice. I'm not saying don't do it.
No,
Yeah. So that's great. Yeah.
That's, we do cover.
Yeah.
And we do check, and charities should check, like I said, the trustees should.
It's a question to ask them.
Do you have any non-executive positions outside the Pro-Bono area?
The one on the one of Alliance Homes, so that's a housing association down in the Bristol area, about 6,500 properties, so it's sort of in the medium size. It's not one of the giant housing associations, but it's a medium size. So I've been involved there since October. So I'm still learning, finding my way into that position. But the board papers that we've had presented have been sort of immensely interesting. I can't go into any detail, but I think it. You find that you're still finding that you're learning all the way through.
Yeah.
Just had a quick question about politics.
Joy, could you?
Oh, really? Oh.
Okay. Sorry. It's just a bit weird now. About the policies in the housing associations, I was just wondering whether there were templates or model policies, things that actually made the actual process of writing up policies for any of the housing associations to make that work a little easier.
For the Abbey Field, we use for the Abbey for the Abbey Field we use the ones that they provided centrally. For the housing association, we'll get outside advisors in who will help draft up policies. But then they may be amended as we go through the discussion process in the senior leadership team, and then obviously when it comes to board, there might be other areas that the board challenge.
Okay, so at least something from which you can start from.
Yes, but I think it's a question of, with a small charity, how much money have they got to get somebody into draft? So often they are stealing and borrowing from, someone who happens to know someone who happens to know someone who has access to some policies that could be redrafted. If you're a very small charity, sometimes.
I think Brian had a point on insurance.
I'm going to be impressed when it goes ouch when you drop it.
No, my point was more about what you're talking about here is quite a lot of not-for-profit related sort of things. As far as the next step, if you were going down that route, is it really considering things not-for-profit, if I can say, business, profitable but probably non-paid roles, and before looking at paid roles, just your thoughts on that sort of avenue if people ultimately want to develop a portfolio of probably remunerated roles? Just your thoughts on it.
So just to clarify, yes.
How could you
so just to clarify that I've understood, so you're talking about the progression from, say, taking a pro bono into a paid role, and sort of how do you balance that, or?
Yeah, or what's a good avenue, if that is ultimately what some people want to do?
I think you have to find your own path. Everybody has a different way of approaching it. I think the key thing is to have enough skills so that when you got to a paid role, if that's where you're heading, you have enough skills to show and to evidence, either through your executive career or through extra work that you've done outside. But how you do that is a question of, do you take on pro bono roles? Do you take on additional challenges? And then how many do you take on before you find you've got too many of those and can't dedicate enough time to the paid role? Does that, yes?
Is your question about taking a pro bono role in a not-for-profit charity and moving to a paid role in a not-for-profit charity, or moving to a commercial organisation?
No, so mine was more about if that is your aspiration. It's not my aspiration, but I know speaking to quite a lot of people, a lot of my friends, and things saying, I think I'm going to do pro bono, probably charities, and then probably find a small company that I can work with before I can actually do the roles that I really want to. And I just wonder what your experiences and what you may recommend to a situation.
I would say of my pro bono roles, I was thinking about this the last time I was here, 50% have turned into paid work. And the answer to that is, I don't do pro bono to get paid roles. I do pro bono because it's good work to do. And because I enjoy it, I do well at it. And because I do well at it, they offer me paid work, not the other way around. Can I pass that up the way? It's a game. You've got to play it.
Yeah, I think mine was just a comment that even in the paid roles, normally you start with doing a good job, and it's the quality of your work that actually leads on to either promotion or more pay. That's it.
Nobody wants it now.
Where?
I think just picking up that point though, yes, it is the quality of the work you do. So if you go and just turn up to meetings, what are you adding? And then realistically, so one of these contacts of yours, if they go and do that and they just sit in the meeting and barely, or they don't turn up to the meetings, which is even worse, because the decision is still being made in their absence. So what are they doing, and how much are they getting out of it? I think it's a question of, how much do you put in and how much do you get out? It's the same as normal working life, no difference.
I'd add a bit to that.
I'll throw it too.
Look at that. I'd add a bit to that. If you're from a very technical background and you can take that technical skill into a charity, you may not have a lot of experience on the governance side, so you're learning from them about governance, which you could then take into a different role, but you're giving them value from your technical position, essentially.
Any other thoughts?
I've got a question then. In your experience, how long do you think you can stay in one particular role and still remain effective as a challenge?
Yeah, good question. I can answer that one because I've been an interim manager probably all of my life. And I think it takes you 3 months to get going. I think I've done it by 6 and they hold on to me by 9. But I should have gone at 6. That's just me. That is for a change job, and that'd be going in like a CEO or a chief restructuring officer. Weigh it up. I mean, to be fair, with venture capital, I get 3 weeks. If I've got 1 week to work out what the problem is, 1 week to put a solution, and if I haven't got some answers showing through by week 3, then a large number of people get fired. That's the venture capital bit. In a charity world, it's very different, and pro bono is very different because you've got to deal. It's a different culture. But I still think it takes you 3 months to understand the problems and start making a difference. It takes you 6 months to get it done, and you really are beyond your sell-by date at 9 months, in my view, because by that time they've got used to you or they've had enough of you and they want to get back to normal life without that level of change. And my thought would be, you don't change organisations by emails and memos. You change it by one conversation, by one conversation, by one conversation. It's hearts and minds. And 6 months is enough, one by one conversation, hearts and minds, to change it if you're going to. So if we're talking about change, it's about people. People are endlessly time consuming, but I think 6 months, everybody's got bored of each other and you've either done it or frankly, you've all got bored with each other. That's my own personal experience.
I'm just going to add that I think in terms of trustee roles, if I just pick up on, so a trustee role, I think you probably again are spending the first 6 months getting to understand what's really going on. The first year you definitely should understand what's going on. By the second year, if you haven't started to make a difference, then what are you doing? And then really probably then question of whether you do stay longer in that position and carry on, or do you then look to exit after year 3? And I'm looking at one at the moment that I'm thinking of exiting, and I've spoken to the chair, so the chair's aware of it. But again, you can't just walk out of some of these roles, because if you're doing something that they're reliant on, who's going to do it? You're going to leave them in trouble, big trouble, if you just walk away. So it's a different if you're actually with that legal trustee role. You've got to think about that. You can just leave, clearly, but what does that do to the charity? What does that do to your reputation anyway, for leaving somebody in the lurch?
I agree with you. I mean, I think as a trustee, maybe 3 years, because what you're providing is some longer term stability. And maybe you're only meeting 6 times a year. That's not the same as being pro bono, being in there for a project for every day for however long it is. So I would agree.
And I think the issue we had with one of the charities with people in there for 10 years, yeah, that's too long, way too long.
I'd also argue that, you know, my job is about leadership in many ways. And in smaller organisations, you've got to provide more leadership because you've got less resource. There are more challenges.
Yeah.
So in providing leadership, your job really is to do yourself out of the job. You know, and actually, if you're in there too long, it's because you're holding on to something that you want to hold on to. You're doing it for yourself, not for the organisation. So if you're really doing it for the organisation and you're really being a good leader, you should have cracked it in 6 to 9 months. And you should do yourself out of a job and go and take yourself somewhere else and let somebody else come in and take over with some fresh, another personal view.
Sure, get it. 1, 2, 3.
I'll ask my question.
That didn't work.
Thanks. So, I've recently taken up a trustee role with a charity, and you know, the sort of good governance guidelines, whatever, say maximum 3 times 3 years sort of service, overall 9 years. Coming back to your point, but there are people who, you know, serve not just on this charity but elsewhere more than that. What I'm experiencing and what I'm sort of challenging back or whatever, just because of the point you're making about the lack of resources these charities have, it is a big task and ask of them to, you know, do my trustee induction or, you know, sort of get me up to speed, as well as me giving and, you know, putting my time to understand the charity. There's a lot of that one-to-one, you know, interaction I'm demanding from them, which is, again, taking away from their time. So conscious of that, I am feeling, you know, when I went in, I thought I'll do a 3-year term. Now, I don't know how things will unfold, but I feel almost indebted that I should serve more, you know, because of the investment, in a way, they are doing to me as well, each and every one of them in the process. So just a thought there. I mean, not necessarily a big challenge, but just a thought there. It's very different than, the feeling I'm holding is very different than a commercial setting, you know, the other examples you've given.
So,
or
you
from
know,
my point there, it's like their view to me kind of thing.
I mean, you know, it's, for me, you know, I've always got a fairly radical point of view, really, because I come from a restructuring world and I get 3 weeks to sort things. So you have to ask yourself why you're doing it anyway. What are you doing it for? Why are you getting out of bed? To either be a trustee or to do pro bono work. And the truth is that if you're there to help people to change, then you can't be there to turn up for tea and biscuits 4 times a year. I mean, you can if you want to add it to your CV, you know, get a nice board role, improve the way you look, get a bit of experience and network, that's fine. If that's what you're doing, you know, I'm sure that's great. You can be there for 9 years. But if you're there really to give something of yourself to the vision of the charity and genuinely make a difference to the beneficiaries who are more vulnerable probably and are there where you can help them, then you really have to measure yourself in terms of, even more so than a commercial world, measure yourself as to what you're really achieving, and is it enough, and is it quick enough, and are you making enough difference? And it may be that in that one you're not, but in another one you might do because your skills are more aligned to something else. So I just take a very commercial view about it again. You know, if you're looking at change, which is what I look at, not everybody has to, they could be looking at technical expertise, then, you know, change, again, as I say, you know, is done not by, I mean, to be fair, it's not done by policies, in my view, with a great, forgive me, it's done by behaviour. And I did one recently. I had 100 people reporting to me. We had 60 policies. I walk in as chief executive. I say, how many people have read the policies? I really only got one person that might have read 20% of them because they wrote them. So, with the greatest respect again, if you're going to write policies, you have to live them. You know, they have to be behaviours. And therefore, I suppose my answer to you would be, it's not enough just to write 60 policies and nobody reads them, and the behaviour doesn't change when you talk about change. You have to ask yourself, what are you doing to add to the organisation, to improve the lives of the beneficiaries, whoever they are, and are you doing it fast enough? Or can somebody else do it faster and better than you can, in which case I would argue you should go and do something else where you can add more value elsewhere. I don't know if that helps at all. They owe you nothing, you owe them nothing, beyond the fact that you're adding value and making a difference to people's lives.
My point was, I feel even more obliged to add value. I went in there to add value. I feel even more obliged seeing, because despite the lack of resources, the kind of investment, time investment they're doing. That was my point, basically.
Yeah.
So we're, the starting point of the argument is the same.
I agree. Yeah, and I'm just guessing is you have to constantly monitor yourself to make sure you're not just staying for longer because you feel you owe them something, but you really are staying for longer because you're able to give something back and continue to do so. Yeah, violently agree.
My question is, when you're looking on taking on a role, obviously due diligence is quite key for us and the organisation. What would be the key 2 or 3 points that you have come across previously that you say, definitely these are points you should cover? Obviously, financial position, take for granted. You do a review of that, and also just understanding what are the key changes or why are they potentially looking for you or somebody else to come into that role. But what are the key due diligence points that you would say, dig into those areas first so you know where you probably got to focus on? Good luck.
Certainly there's a lot of information. If it's a charity, the Charities Commission website has information, has financial information on each charity. It also has when they filed their accounts, so you can begin to build a picture of, is it right at the last moment, or is it sort of reasonable time beforehand. The accounts then will show you obviously the financial position. You can see how many trustees have changed role. Is there a big turnover of trustees? One I went to, I actually asked them that question. They felt a bit uncomfortable answering, but it was very apparent that they had several trustees who'd gone and come within a very short space of time. So again, that sort of plays to asking. I mean, the diligence is you can go on to regulators will have what is the regulatory marking for that particular organisation. So if it's anything that is CQC, they've obviously got CQC ratings. I'm sure schools have got school ratings somewhere, but certainly anything under the regulator of social housing has a score that organisation has, and then also that is on the website. The same for NHS boards. There is massive information. They are under CQC, so you can see exactly how that particular trust is doing. So there's quite a bit of information that you can find out ahead of going into a discussion. But I guess it's more, I would say the regulatory and the finance side probably initially. Culture is key to.
And culture use, obviously just talking to the board, your colleagues to be or whatever, trustees is one level, but it's in the organisation, and what do you do then?
Well, you might just actually want to try and approach the organisation to see how they respond. Just phoning them up, walking into wherever they are present, because you'll begin to see how do people welcome you or not welcome you. I think there's quite a lot that you can still do before you go anywhere near a discussion.
I'm being your wingman here.
That's fine. I assumed you had something to add.
I would look at 2 things, I think. One would be a very commercial view, because I don't see charities different than commercial organisations in terms of due diligence and so on. And it would be, as a pattern of behaviour going backwards and forecasts going forwards, are revenues exceeding costs. It's very simple. It was Jack Welch of GE said very first of all, he said, listen, business is not that difficult. All you have to do is get the revenue above the costs. But so many charities that you walk into don't understand it. I mean, I've walked into charities and run a CEO, chair and whatever else, where they've been losing $500,000 and not realised it. It happens all the time. The second thing I would say is you've got to look at input, output, outcome. It's the outcome that's the only thing that matters. And I would look at social return on investment, for example, as a measure of if you're going to make a surplus, what is it for? Sorry, the other bit in the middle, would be you make a surplus. Is there a pattern of behaviour of making surpluses which go back into the organisation? Secondly, has it got reserves of between 3 to 6 months on a regular basis, going backwards and going forwards? And thirdly, the most important is, in terms of the work that it does, can you measure the outcome, like social return on investment? And I could say to you that in organisations that I've run as chair or CEO, for every pound that goes into it, we will give £5 back. Now, it's a pretty, it's an art, not a science, social return on investment, but are we really creating value for our beneficiaries? And can we measure that in some way that in our guts we believe?
I'll just pick up one of those points, the cover, because in terms of the Abbeyfield, we want to keep a year's cover, so we can run it for a year. So we're making sure we're running on that basis. In terms of housing associations, I think they typically would run for about 18 months to 2 years cover. So if you've got something that isn't in that space, it's then where is that creaking, and then what are they beginning to do?
I would say that
Yeah.
the difference to that would be that if you're fundraising, funders do not want to give money to organisations that have got reserves of more than 3 to 6 months. That would be
that is a challenge in another charity I'm involved in, where they've got masses of reserves, and it's a constant battle. So it's almost like the funders the funders will give to a charity that's almost failing, which is ironic, and then a charity that actually has cover for its business, they then challenge and say, well, you've already got X amount of money, why aren't you using that? And that's a real...
But we both agree, you would say adequate reserves.
Adequate.
And whatever the policy is, and a pattern of behaviour going backwards and going forwards with an adequate level of reserves that the board have agreed is appropriate for the business.
Absolutely, because and also you don't want somebody who suddenly comes in gung-ho spending without looking at the implications of that. And it really goes to the core of, if you've ever read the Kids Company report, it's the essence of how not to run a business, and the Kids Company report makes scary but really, really sort of compelling reading. Yeah.
Sure, Paul's got
Time for questions.
He has.
Comment on the question.
Hi, Paul Pittman, Price Bailey. I sort of head up the insolvency team at Price Bailey, so with your restructuring hat on, I mean, we sort of seen lots of charities and all those sort of things, housing associations, and it's a difficult job that people have got to go into, because either they need to raise money, or that they've got certain people who don't have money to sort of put in, especially on the housing association. Say you need to sort of have a capital call or something. That can be a challenge, and then you've got different people on the board with a different hat on, really. They're all looking after themselves rather than necessarily looking after everyone. So, I mean, that can be a real challenge as well. But as you sort of said, the Kids Company one was a very interesting case study of anything that should be done wrong, but she just had so much power and everyone sort of went with it. But some of the other trustees, I mean, they ended up getting disqualified because they just didn't follow processes and just allowed her to sort of rule the roost, basically. So that's all I wanted to say. I didn't really want to say anything more. And sorry I'm late.
Anybody else have any burning questions? Draw to a close then.
Oh, good, I try.
Missed. Have another go. Is it?
So I think the what are the three sort of main messages that you got from this evening? Of the value of pro bono roles in terms of building your board career. Anybody?
Building up skill set.
Yeah. It's all. Yeah. proof of your board level skills,
I like the idea
Roberto.
of, thinking of being clear ahead of time of the skills that you want to build up while you're there. I thought that was a very good point.
Yeah.
And in terms of actually doing the work, I like your point about what are the beneficiaries getting out of your input? I mean, you're not getting paid, so if you're not if you're not moving the needle for the beneficiaries.
I mean, ultimately, they're the client.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not the client. You're the supplier.
Yeah, and your insurance is that you're doing a good job. I really like that one. The networking benefits, or the network benefits. So you're building your board level network. If it's a well-run charity, it's probably got a really good chair, and if that person is a really good chair, they're probably chair on multiple boards, and you see them in action, they see you in action. Good things will happen. Alice.
Can I just add that we survey all our volunteers who are highly skilled professionals like yourselves, and one of the top things that comes out is that they really enjoy doing the volunteering. Outside of the skills or any kind of development, they actually really enjoy moving out of their strategic corporate world and really using their empathy to give something back and seeing how kind of the other half really struggle. And that is the key motivator for nearly every one of them.
Giving back.
That's why they do it. They don't do it because I want to put it on my CV. The ones that do that, you'll see them with Cranfield Trust volunteer on their LinkedIn profile, and then I look and they've done no project. So we do have those, but the ones that are really good volunteers are the ones that actually do work because that's what they really want to do. And they might put it on LinkedIn, but not.
Now, by the same token, I mean, there are several people in this room who have the FT-NED diploma, and have they got it on their LinkedIn profile? Not yet. What are you waiting for, guys? Yeah, so there you have it. Have I missed anything? Nothing vital? I think sort of but from both sides, going in with eyes wide open is absolutely critical, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with you being very, very upfront and saying, I would like to do this for you, a 9-month project or a 3-year service as a trustee, because I want to develop these skills. You're very clear. They fully understand, why you're there, how long you're going to be there. Everybody wins. So, we meet again on the 4th of June, back at Mazar. They are French, They have lovely offices at Tower Bridge House. And our topic then is cybersecurity. Yes, I think if you came to our digital transformation session, you will be aware that there's GDPR 2.0 looming. So we've got 2 very high-profile speakers for you, including a lady called Wendy Barnes, who's on the board of several FTSE 100 PLCs, has been on the board of the National Crime Agency as well. Hope to see you then. In the meantime, rumour has it there are some refreshments out there. So, can we thank our speakers and panelists?